Hello everyone and welcome to the final chapter of the NPC Dialog system tutorial. In the previous part, we almost finished the dialog system. Today we'll polish everything and implement a look at setup. This will make the whole scene feel much more realistic. For example, if you are using a body animation with unwanted head movement, this setup ensures that the characters always look at each other. Let's start with the head movement of the NPC. The head bone is part of the body skeleton, so open the ABP NPC body. In the event graph, create an event blueprint initialize animation node. Get the owning actor and cast it to your NPC Metahuman blueprint. Then right-click and choose Promote to Variable. Now we have a reference to our NPC. Next, create an event blueprint update animation node. Bring in the NPC reference and check if it is valid. Use the version with a question mark so we get execution pins. From the reference, get the trigger zone variable. Promote it to a new variable and connect it to the isValid output. We'll use this to make sure the look at only works inside the trigger zone. Now create a new variable called lookAtLocation and set its type to vector. To define this location for different character sizes, we create a function that can be used in any of our animation blueprints. In the content browser, right-click and create a blueprint function library. Name it getLookAtLocation. Add an input called character and set its type to actor. Also add an output called lookAtLocation of the type vector. From the character pin, search for Get Components by Class. Set the component class to Skeletal Mesh Component. Add a for each loop node and connect the execution pin. From the array element pin, add a does_socket_exist node. Use facial_c_nose as the socket name. Add a branch and connect the true pin to the output node. From the array element pin again, add a getSocketLocation node. Also use facial_c_nose as the socket name and connect the return value to the output node. Compile and save. Back in the animation blueprint, get the player character and check if it is valid. If it is, call the getLookAtLocation function and connect the player character to the character input. Now set the local lookAtLocation variable. Finally, we want to control the strength of the lookAt. Create a new float variable called alpha. Set the alpha to a value between 0 and 1. In my case, I'm using 0.75. Now switch over to the anim graph. We'll insert the lookAt setup right before the output pose. Right-click and search for lookAt. Then connect your blend poses by integer node to its input. In the details panel, set the bone to modify to the head bone. Set the lookAt clamp to around 55 to avoid unnatural head rotations and set the lookAtLocation to expose as pin. Bring in the alpha and lookAtLocation variables and connect them to the lookAt node. Now create a blend poses by bool node. Use the trigger zone variable as the active value. Connect the lookAt output to the true pose and your default body idle animation to the false pose. For a more natural transition, set the true blend time to 1.2 and the false blend time to 0.8. You can tweak these values later if needed. Finally, connect everything to the output pose. Then compile and hit play. Now, when you enter the trigger zone, the NPC will react by looking at you. And of course, this also works during the dialogue itself. Next, we'll make the NPC's eyes look at the player as well. We can't use the ABP NPC face for this, because the post-process blueprint of the face component would override our look at setup. And we still need the post-process blueprint, for example, to properly attach the head to the body. So instead, we'll implement the look at directly inside the post-process blueprint. To find it, select the face component in your NPC blueprint and double-click the skeletal mesh asset. In the Details panel, you'll find the post-process blueprint under the Animation section. Open it and go to the event graph. Copy the whole event graph setup from the ABP NPC body and paste it here. We just need to update the variables. Delete this SEP node and promote it to a variable again. Also delete the trigger zone node and promote it again. Create a new look at location variable and a new alpha variable. If you use the exact same spelling, the variable nodes will update automatically. Set the alpha value to 0.9 here, so the eyes move a little faster than the head. Then switch to the anim graph. To be able to use this pose output one time for the look at logic and one time as the idle pose, we can store this pose as a cached pose. Drag out and search for Save Cached Pose and name it Idle Pose. Now right-click and search for Idle Pose, then choose Use Cached Pose, Idle Pose. Create a look at node and connect the idle pose to the input. Set the clamp again to 55 and expose the look at location as a pin. For the bone to modify, search for facial_L_I. Also switch the look at axis from Y to Z, because the eye bones have a different orientation than the head bone. Connect the look at location and the alpha variable. For the other eye, duplicate this node including the two variables and change the bone to modify to facial_R_I. Then add a blend pose by bool node to the output. For the false pose, use the cached idle pose again. And for the active value, use the trigger zone variable. Use 0.8 for the true blend time and 1.2 for the false blend time. Finally, connect the output to the output pose. Compile and test if it works. The NPC now has a fully working look at setup. So let's create the look at for the player's head next. At this point, the player needs to know which NPC to look at, especially when using multiple NPCs. For that, create a variable inside the player character blueprint. Name it Active NPC and set its type to Actor. Now we need to set this variable from the NPC blueprint, so let's use our interface. Open the interface and create a new function. Name it setActiveNPC. Add a new input. Name it also ActiveNPC and set the type to Actor. Open the NPC blueprint, go to Interfaces and implement the setActiveNPC event. Get the player character and cast it to your player character blueprint. Then set the ActiveNPC variable and connect the pins. Now go to the overlap check. At the end, call setActiveNPC from the interface. Leave the target set to self. If the trigger zone is true, the active NPC value is also self. If the trigger zone is false, add another call of the interface event and leave the value empty. Now open the ABP body of your player character. Here we already have some logic in the event graph. Go to the existing initialize animation logic. Drag out from the getOwningActor, cast it to your player character blueprint and promote it to a variable to store a reference. In the update animation event, disconnect the sequence node and make some space to insert our nodes. Bring in the player character reference. Get the active NPC variable from it, promote it to a new variable and connect it to the execution flow. Then check if it is valid. Create a lookAtLocation and an alpha variable here as well. If it is valid, call the getLookAtLocation function, using the active NPC as the character. Then set the lookAtLocation variable and set the alpha to 0.75. For the blending inside the anim graph, we need a trigger zone variable, so create one as a boolean. If the active NPC is valid, we are inside the trigger zone, so set it to true in this chain. If it is not valid, set it to false. Then connect both chains back to the sequence node. Mouse switch to the anim graph. Add the lookAt logic at the very end, between the control rig and the output pose. It's the same setup as before. Save the cached pose and use it again. Add a lookAt node, set the bone to modify to head, set the clamp to 55 and expose the location as a pin. Connect the variables and add a blend poses by bool node. Use the trigger zone variable as the active value and the cached pose as the false pose. Set the blend times to 1.2 and 0.8, then connect everything to the output pose. Compile and check the result. Now the player also looks at the NPC when entering the trigger zone. Finally, let's set up the eyes of the player character. To do this properly, the player needs its own face post process blueprint. So rename the existing face post process blueprint and add NPC to the name. Then duplicate it and replace NPC with player. Now open the player character blueprint, select the face component and double-click the skeletal mesh. In the Details panel, go to the Animation section and change the post-process blueprint to the one you just created. Then open it. The whole anim graph logic is already set up, so no changes are needed here. We only need to make a few adjustments in the event graph. First, cast the owning actor to the player instead of the NPC, and promote the result to get the correct reference. Then copy the complete logic from the player body ABP and paste it here. Then connect it to the update animation event. Delete the set NPC node and promote it again. Connect the pins and set the alpha value to 0.9. Done. The lookAt setup is now complete. This chapter turned out longer than expected, so I split it into 2 parts. Stay tuned for the second half. Cheers!